and welcome to Peter Presents Iliad, episode 15, where, of course, we're going to be reading book 15 in this 24-book epic poem by Homer, as translated by Stanley Lombardo. Now, when we last left our heroes and other people, Zeus had been seduced by Hera. If you missed our sexy episode 14, I encourage you to watch that alone sometime. Now, moving right along, Zeus, who was helping the Trojans and pushing them into the Achaean or Greek camp like behind their wall and all that, had been distracted by Hera and fell asleep, and so the Greeks started to resurge back. So that's where we were, we're 9 years into the Battle of Troy, and so that's about it. Let me get to my spot here. Here we go. All right, so let me check the chat real quick, see if anyone said anything yet. All right, good, excellent. Seems to be up and running just fine. And if all the technical things are ready and you're there, and I hope that you have something nice to drink. I myself am drinking tea this time, and I'm using this Texas mug that says, "Life's too short not to live it," as a Texan. And this is an invitation to all y'all out there who may not be from Texas or who don't live there or whatever, that you can still be a Texan if you want to be. Anyhow, that's sort of the uplifting moment of today's bloody, violent episode as we descend once more into the pages of Iliad, this time with Book 15. The Trojans had retreated through the palisade and trench, a beaten army, and had halted beside their chariots, their faces pale with terror, when Zeus awoke on Ida's summit with Hera by his side. He jumped to his feet and saw the Trojans being routed by howling Greeks, with Poseidon, lord, among them. And Hector lying on the plain, his friends crouched around him while he gasped for breath in a haze of pain and vomited blood. It was no flyweight Greek who had hit him. The father of gods and men felt pity for him, and scowling at Hera, delivered this speech. "Hera, you scheming bitch! This trick of yours has taken Hector out and routed his army, and you may be the first to profit from your plot when I whip the living daylights out of you. Or don't you remember when I strung you up with anvils hanging from your feet and gold unbreakable bands on your wrists? You dangled in the air among the clouds, and all the gods on high Olympus protested, but none could come to your rescue. If anyone tried, I'd send him sailing off our balcony. There wouldn't be much left of him when he hit the ground. Even so, my heart still ached for Hercules, you and Boreas, whose squalls you suborned, had maliciously driven him over the desert sea and brought him later to the great city of Kos. I got him out of there and led him back to bluegrass Argos after many labors. I remind you of this, so you'll quit playing games and see where this gets you, making love to me the way you did just now, and tricking me." The ox-eyed lady Hera stiffened at this, and she feathered her words home carefully. "All right, I swear by earth and heaven above, and the subterranean waters of Styx, the greatest and the most awesome oath a god can swear, by your sacred head, and by our marriage couch, upon which I would never perjure myself, that it is not by my will that Poseidon is hurting the Trojans and helping the Greeks. He's acting of his own free will, out of pity for the beating the Greeks are taking by their ships. But I would advise even him to toe the line and follow wherever you lead, dark cloud." Zeus, the father of gods and men, smiled at this, and issued a swift reply. Well, my ox-eyed lady, if your mind really were to be the same as mine, Poseidon would find it difficult not to follow us. So if you mean what you say, go back now to the gods, and send Iris here, and Apollo, she to go down to the bronze-coated Greeks, and tell Lord Poseidon to desist from the war, and Phoebus Apollo to rouse Hector to fight, breathe strength into him again, so that he may forget the pain that now distresses him, and drive the Achaeans back once more in flight. So shall they flee in panic, and fall dead among the hollow ships of Peleus' son, Achilles, who will send forth his comrade Patroclus, whom illustrious Hector will kill with his spear before Ilium, after Patroclus himself has killed many a youth, among them Sarpedon my son. In wrath for Patroclus, Achilles will kill Hector. From that time on, I shall cause the Trojans to be driven back from the ships until the Greeks capture steep Ilion through Athena's counsel. But until that time comes, I will not cease from my wrath, or allow any immortal to bear aid to the Danaans until the desire of the son of Peleus is fulfilled, as I promised at the first, with a nod of my head, on the day when Thetis begged me by my knees to honor Achilles, sacker of cities. White-armed Hera was obedient to his word, and went from Ida's mountains to long Olympus. The thought of a man who has seen the world travels quickly to any spot on the globe when he wishes he were there. So Hera flew with the speed of desire and came to Olympus. She found the immortal gods assembled in the house of Zeus. When they saw her, they were quick to toast her arrival. She ignored them all, but did take a cup from lovely Themis, who had run up to greet her, and who now addressed her with winged words. Hera, why have you come? You look so upset. Zeus must have really frightened you, your own husband. The goddess, ivory-armed Hera, replied, Don't get me started, Themis. You know yourself what a bully he is, and how stubborn. No, let's get on with the feast, and you will hear, along with the others, what Zeus means to do. It's not very pretty, and I rather doubt that anyone, mortal or god, will be pleased, or if anyone will still have an appetite left. Hera composed herself and sat down. The god's mood darkened. Hera smiled with her lips, but her dark brows were tense, and at last she burst out indignantly. We're all simpering idiots to be angry with Zeus. We all want to get to him, to talk him down, to beat some sense into him, but does he care? He doesn't even notice. No, he sits apart, secure in his supreme, almighty power. You'll just have to take whatever grief he dishes out to you. I'm afraid that now it's Ares' turn to suffer, seeing that his son, whom he loves more than any mortal man, his dear Escalates, has died in battle. When Ares heard this, he smacked his muscled thighs with the flat of his hands and wailed out loud, None of you Olympians can blame me now if I go to the Greek ships and avenge my son. Not even if I am blasted by Zeus and lie among corpses in the blood and dust. And he ordered his sons, Panic and Rout, to yoke his team while he buckled on armor. The hostility between gods and Zeus would have reached new heights then, had not Athena, afraid for them all, jumped from her throne, sped through the door, and disarmed Ares. She plucked the helmet from his head, the shield from his shoulders, took the stiff bronze spear from his hands, and gave the furious war god a tongue-lashing. Are you out of your mind? Didn't you hear what Hera just said, or don't you care? Do you want more trouble than you can handle? Forced to crawl back to Olympus yourself and sowing disaster for the rest of us? He'll leave the Trojans and the Greeks, you know, and come back here to raise hell with us, mauling us all in turn, guilty or not. So please, get over your anger for your son. Better men than he have killed or will be. Human offspring are hard to save. Ares gave in and sat back down on his throne. Then Hera called Apollo out of the palace, and Iris too, the immortal's messenger, and said to them in a quick flurry of words, Zeus wants you to go to Ida immediately. When you arrive, you will look upon his face and do whatever he orders you to do. Having said that, Lady Hera turned away and sat down on her throne. The pair darted off and came to Ida, mountain mother of beasts, and found Cronu's son on Gargaron Peak, sitting in a wreath of fragrant cloud. They stood respectfully before the face of Zeus, and his mood brightened when he saw how promptly the two of them had obeyed his wife's words. He addressed Iris first, with words on wings. Go, swift Iris, to Lord Poseidon, and tell him this as true messenger. Bid him cease from war and battle, and go off to the other gods, or to the bright sea. If he is inclined to disregard my words, have him consider in his mind and heart that, strong as he is, he cannot withstand my onset, since I am mightier by far and elder born. Yet he has the gall to claim he is equal to me, whom all the gods dread. He spoke, and Iris was off in a blur of wind, moving down Ida's mountain to holy Troy, like snow or hail flying from the clouds under a cold blast from the brilliant north. So Iris flew with the speed of desire and confronted the glorious shaker of earth. A message for you, blue-maned sea god. I come here from Zeus, who bears the Aegis, and who bids you cease from war and battle and go off to the other gods or to the bright sea. If you are inclined to disregard his words, he threatens to come here himself and wage war against you. And he strongly advises you to avoid his hands, since he is mightier by far and elder born. Yet you have the gall to claim you are equal to him, whom all the gods dread. The Earthshaker made his angry reply. He may be strong, but this is outrageous, to force me, his peer, to stop against my will. We three brothers whom Rhea bore to Cronos, Zeus, myself, and Hades, lord of the dead, divided up the universe into equal shares. When we shook the lots, I got the gray sea, and as my eternal domain. Hades, the nether gloom. Zeus, the broad sky, with clouds and bright air. Earth and high Olympus remain common to all. I will not follow Zeus's whims, mighty as he is. Let him remain content with his third share, and not try to frighten me as if I were a coward. Better for him to threaten his own children with abusive language, the sons and daughters he begot himself, who will listen because they must. And Iris, her feet soft in the offshore wind. Is this the message, blue-maned sea god, I should take to Zeus? This hard, unyielding speech? Will you not relent, as noble hearts often do? You know how the Furies always side with the elder. And Poseidon, Earthshaker, answered her. That is very well spoken, Iris. It is good when a messenger understands how things are. but bitter pain comes to my heart and soul whenever anyone attacks an equal, a peer of equal status, with angry words. Although I am offended, I will yield for now. But I will say this, and make this threat from my heart. If in spite of me and Pallas Athena, and Hera, and Hermes, and Hephaestus Lord, he spares steep Iliad, and is not willing to lay it waste nor give power to the Greeks, he can be sure of eternal strife between us. And with that Poseidon left the Greek army and dove into the sea. They missed him sorely. Cumulus clouds piled high on Ida's summit. Zeus turned and spoke to Apollo. "Go now, Phoebus, to bronze-clad Hector. Tremendous Poseidon has gone into the sea that laps the earth, avoiding my precipitous wrath. Too bad. The fight would have been legend even among the gods below with Cronus. But it was better for us both that he yielded before me, angry and indignant as he was. It would not have been settled without some sweat. At any rate, take the tasseled aegis in your hands and shake it over the Greeks to rout their heroes, and see to Hector yourself. Fortify him until the Greeks have run back to their ships on the Hellespont. I'll take it from there and see the Achaeans get some breathing space." Apollo did not disobey his father's words. He came down from Ida's peaks like a falcon that bloodies doves in flight, swift on the wing, and found Hector, light of Troy, sitting up. He no longer lay down, and catching his breath. He recognized his friends, and his gasping and sweating had stopped, since Zeus now had a mind to revive him. Apollo stood close and said, "Hector, son of Priam, why are you sitting here apart from the rest, scarcely alive? What is wrong?" Hector's helmet shone in the light. He said weakly, "Which god are you? Questioning me face to face? Haven't you heard that while I was killing his friends at the rear of the ships, booming Ajax hit me in the chest with a stone and took the fight out of me? I thought I would see the dead in Hades' house this very day, after I had breathed forth my last." And Apollo, lord of bright distances, "Courage. The son of Cronos has sent me from Ida to help and stand by you. No one less than me, Phoebus Apollo, the gold sword, who has in the past saved both you and your steep citadel. Come now, and rally your many charioteers to drive their horses against the hollow ships. I will go ahead and smooth all the ground for the chariots, and I will turn the Greek heroes." And he breathed strength into the man who tended Troy's army as a shepherd his flock. Picture a horse that has eaten barley in its stall, breaking its halter and galloping across the plain, making for his accustomed swim in the river. A glorious animal, head held high, mane streaming like wind on his shoulders. Sure of his splendor, he prances by the horse runs and the mares in pasture. That was Hector, knees and feet like wind, as he rallied the chariots. He had heard the god's voice. And the Greeks? Hunters and hounds have been hot on the trail of an antlered stag or a mountain goat, but a sudden sheer rock or a tangled wood saves the animal, which was not theirs to catch, and their shouting brings a bearded lion into their path. Then the eager hunters turn back. Hordes of Greeks had been advancing relentlessly, carving their way forward with spears and swords, but when they saw Hector patrolling the ranks, they tensed up with fear and stopped in their tracks. Thoas assessed the situation for them. This man, son of Andremon, and by far the best of the Aetolians, was not only good with javelin and sword, but very few Greeks of his generation could vie with him when the young men debated. Now he addressed the Greek command. "Is this a miracle my eyes are seeing? Hector has risen from the dead! At least, we all hoped he had died under Ajax's hands. One of the gods has delivered Hector again, and he's to go doing what he's always done. Cut the legs out from under many Danaans, since he's not standing out there as a champion contrary to the will of thundering Zeus. Now listen to what I say we should do. Let's have the troops fall back to the ships and have all our best take a stand there so we can hit him first and push him back with a phalanx of spears. That should stop him from being so eager to get to our troops." They heard him out and did as he said. The leaders of his action were big Ajax, Idomeneus, Toker, Meriones, and Meges. Collecting a few good men, they took up a position opposite Hector as the main troops fell back to the ships. The Trojans attacked en masse. Hector out front and advancing with long strides, and before him Apollo, shining, his shoulders capped with cloud. The aegis he bore in his hands, a shaggy electric glow. This, the craft of Hephaestus, and given to Zeus for the routing of armies. But now Apollo bore it in his hands before the Trojan army. The tight knot of Greeks met them, and a shrill cry rose from each side. Arrows jumped from bowstrings, and spears hurled by bold hands either stuck in young men fast, but not fast enough, in battle, or stopped halfway before touching white skin, and stood quivering in the ground, lusting for flesh. As long as Apollo held the aegis still, soldiers on both sides were hit and went down. But when he looked the Greeks full in the face, and shook the aegis, and yelled as only a god can, he shriveled their hearts, and they lost their nerve. They became like cattle, or a flock of sheep when a pair of wolves attacks them at midnight out of darkness, and no herdsman is near. These pathetic, running Greeks panicked by Apollo, who gave all the glory to the Trojans and Hector. The fighting was scattered, man to man. Hector took out Stichius and Arcesilaus. One was leader of the bronze-shirted Boeotians, the other a comrade of the hero Menestheus. Aeneas' victims were Medon and Iasus. Medon was a bastard son of Oileus, and Ajax's brother, but he lived in Phylace, far from his homeland, because he had killed a relative of Areopas, his stepmother, whom Oileus had married. Iasus, an Athenian captain, was son of Sphelius Bucalides. Polydamas took out Macistius. Polites killed Echius in the forefront of the fighting, and Clonius fell to brilliant Agenor. Paris got Deiochus from behind, hitting him below the shoulder as he ran back through the front lines and driving the bronze home. While they were stripping the armor from these, the Greeks were crowding madly into the trench, against the stakes, and by sheer pressure through the wall. Hector called to the Trojans, making his voice carry, "Forget the spoils and go for the ships! If I catch any man hanging back on this side, he's dead on the spot, with no family funeral. Dogs will tear his body apart before the city." He brought the whip down on his horses' backs and called to the Trojans along the ranks. They answered his shout and held their horses even with his. The noise was deafening. Before their rolling chariots, Phoebus Apollo danced on the banks of the trench and pushed the earth into the cavity, making for them a causeway as wide as a field for the javelin throw. They poured over it, rank over rank, Apollo leading the way with the priceless aegis and casting down the Achaean wall with ease. A child playing on the seashore will build the sand into fantastic shapes, then gleefully knock them down with his feet. Yes, Apollo, all that Achaean toil went down like sand, and you made them run all the way back to their ships, stopped by the line of vessels. They cried out to each other, but mostly to the gods, lifting their hands, each man praying, and Nestor of Gerania praying the hardest, hands outstretched to the starry sky. Father Zeus, if ever any man of us burned to thee in wheat-bearing Argos, fat thigh bones of bulls and of rams, and prayed to return, and thou didst promise and nod thy head, remember it now and deliver us, O God of Olympus, from the day of doom, nor allow the Achaeans thus to be vanquished by the men of Troy. Zeus heard the old man's prayer, and the sky pealed with thunder. But when the Trojans heard the rumbling overhead, they redoubled their efforts against the Greeks. Far out at sea, a huge wave washes over the gunwales of a ship driven by a gale. The wind is whipping the waves even higher. The Trojans shrieked as they rushed over the wall, driving their chariots into the Greek camp to fight at the ship's sterns with bladed spears. They from their cars, the Greeks from the decks of the tarred ships to which they had climbed, and from which they fought with the long naval pikes they had on board for battles at sea, huge jointed poles armed with bronze tips. And Patroclus, all during the fight for the wall, which took place some distance from the beached ships, sat in the hut of Eurypylus, his wounded host, cheering him up with small talk and rubbing ointments onto his ugly wound to ease his dark pangs. But when he saw the Trojans rushing onto the wall, and the Greeks beating a noisy retreat, he groaned and slapped his thighs with his hand, saying, "Eurypylus, I know you're hurting, but I can't stay with you here any longer. A big fight is brewing. Have your man take care of you. I'm off to see Achilles, to try to talk him into fighting. God willing, I may be able to persuade him. Persuasion works when it comes from a friend." As Patroclus ran off, the Greeks withstood the Trojan onslaught, but could not push them back from the ships, even with their superior numbers. Nor could the Trojans break their resistance and get into the middle of the ships and huts. The battle was stretched as taut as a carpenter's cord, snapped onto a beam to mark a straight line. And battle the Trojans that way. Oh. There we go. So even was the tension along the line of ships, though at each ship there were different engagements. Hector had made straight for Ajax. Ajax stood as if scissored out of the sky on a black ship, and he and Hector now fought for that ship. Hector trying to push him back and burn it, Ajax holding him off. Neither could do much about the other. So Ajax cast and hit Caletor, son of Clitius, who was bringing up fire. He fell heavily, the torch dropping from his hand. He was Hector's cousin. And when Hector saw him go down in the sand before the ship, he called to the Trojans and Lycians, "Stand your ground and fight for Clitius' son! Don't let the Greeks strip him of his armor just because he has fallen by the ships!" As he spoke, his spear flashed toward Ajax, missing him but hitting Lycophron, Mastor's son, and one of Ajax's lieutenants, who lived with him because he had killed a man in sacred Cythera. Hector's spear caught him above the ear as he stood near Ajax, and he fell backward from the ship's stern. He was dead when he hit the ground. Ajax stiffened, and he said to his brother, "Toker, we've lost a true friend, Lycophron, whom we honored as we did our parents, when he came from Cythera to live with us. Hector killed him. Where are your arrows and the bow that Phoebus Apollo gave you?" Toker lost no time in coming up to him with his strung bow and quiver of arrows, shooting rapid fire at the Trojans. He hit Cleitus, who who was the son of Pisenor, and Polydamas' friend, as he drove, busy with the reins, into the thick of battle, rendering service to Hector and the Trojans, none of whom could help him now. The arrow whizzed into his neck from behind, and he fell from the chariot. The horses swerved, rattling the empty car. Polydamas saw it all and got to the horses first, handing them over to Astinus, son of Procyon, with strict orders to hold them close and keep an eye on them. Polydamas then returned to the front. Teucer drew out another arrow, this one for Hector, and it would have stopped that hero from fighting by the ships if it had only hit him and taken his life. But Zeus, who protected Hector, was watching closely and robbed Teucer of his glory, breaking his twisted bowstring just as he was drawing it against Hector. The bronze-armored arrow was shunted aside, and the bow dropped from his hand. Teucer shuddered, and he said to his brother, "Damn! So much for our battle plans. Some god is cutting them pretty short, knocking the bow from my hands and snapping the new string I tied on this morning so it would hold up to repeated rounds." Telamonian Ajax answered him, "That's too bad. But leave your bow and stash of arrows here, since a god has tampered with them and begrudged us their use. Pick up a spear, get a shield on your shoulders, and battle the Trojans that way. They may beat us, but they're not going to take our ships without a fight. Let's keep our minds on what we have to do." So Teucer laid his bow up in his hut. He put a 4-ply shield around his shoulders, and on his mighty head a helmet crafted with a horsehair plume that nodded grimly. And he took a stout spear tipped with bronze, and ran to take his place at Ajax's side. When Hector saw Teucer's arrow fail, he called to his men and made his voice carry, "Trojan, Lycian, and Dardanian soldiers, remember to be the warriors that you are in this fight for the ships. My eyes have seen the shafts of one of their best blasted by Zeus. It is easy to see whom Zeus protects, to whom he gives glory and grants the victory, and whom he lays low and will not protect. Even now he lays low the Argives and gives his protection to us. So close your ranks and fight along the ships, and if any of you is hit and dies, then so be it. Death in defense of your homeland is no dishonor. Your wife is safe, and your children's future. Your house and estate are inviolate, and the Greeks sail off to their own native land." With these words he raised their spirits, and Ajax did the same for the Greeks. "Shame on you, Argives! It's do or die now. If Hector takes the ships, do you think we'll all be walking home? Didn't you hear him screaming at his men to burn our fleet? He's not inviting them to a dance, you know. Our only strategy is this: to take them on hand to hand, our muscle against theirs. Better to get it over with, live or die, than to be strung out here along the ships, pecked to death by inferior men." This bolstered their spirits, and the killing began. Hector took out a Phocian commander named Schedius, Perimedes' son, and Ajax killed Laodamas, an infantry captain and son of Antenor. Polydamas laid low Otus of Cyllene, a comrade of Meges, the Achaean commander. Meges saw this and jumped at him, but Polydamas ducked and Meges missed. Apollo would not allow Polydamas to be killed in the front lines. But Meges did kill Chromis with a thrust to the chest. Chromis fell heavily, and as Meges got busy stripping his armor, Dolops, who knew what to do with a spear, rushed at him. This man was the grandson of Laomedon, and the son of Lampus, his bravest son and a furious fighter. His spear ground through Meges' shield from close range, but the corslet saved him, the intricate plated corslet he wore. His father Phyleus had brought it home from Ephyre on the river Selleis, having received it from the lord Euphetes, a guest friend to protect him in war. It now saved his son's life. Meges thrust back and got his spear onto Dolops' bronze helmet, shearing the horsehair plume from its socket. The whole plume, bright with its fresh scarlet dye, fell in the dust. Meges continued fighting his still confident opponent until Menelaus came up to help him, unnoticed by Dolops, standing slightly behind him. Menelaus heaved his spear through Dolops' shoulder, and the spear, with an eager life of its own, punctured his sternum. Dolops fell on his face, and his two antagonists moved to strip him. But Hector called to his many kinsmen, beginning with Melanippus, Hecatone's son. This man used to pasture his shambling cattle off in Percote, when there was no enemy near. But when the curved prows of the Danaans appeared, he moved back to Ilion, a distinguished Trojan, and lived in the house of Priam, who treated him as a son of his own. Hector prodded him now. "Melanippus, are you going to slack off like this? Don't you have any feeling for your dead kinsmen? Look at how they are handling Dolops' armor. Come on! We can no longer fight the Greeks from long range. Either we kill them, or they take Ilion's heights and murder our people." Melanippus went with him, moving like a god. And Telamonian Ajax urged on the Greeks, "Be men, my friends, and show some shame. You should feel shame before each other in battle. More men with shame are saved than are slain. There's no glory or power in shameless flight." They were already eager to ward off the enemy, but they took his words to heart and fenced in the ships with a hedge of bronze, against which Zeus urged on the Trojans. Then Menelaus, good at the war cry, shouted to Antilochus, "Antilochus, there's none of us younger, faster, or braver than you in battle. Get moving and take some Trojan out." Menelaus melted back into the ranks when he had said this, but he inspired Antilochus, who jumped out into no man's land. With a quick look around, he hurled his spear. The Trojans recoiled from the flare it made, but the throw was not wasted. It hit Melanippus, Hecatone's high-hearted son, right in the chest, beside his nipple, as he came into battle. He fell heavily, and the light left his eyes. Antilochus was all over him. A dog goes after a wounded fawn a hunter hits, with unerring aim, as it jumps from its lair. That was how Antilochus leapt at you, Melanippus, to strip off your armor. But Hector saw him and came running over to meet him in battle, and Antilochus, for all his speed as a combatant, fled. A marauding animal that has killed a hound, or a drover beside his herd, will sometimes flee even before the crowd of men has gathered. As Nestor's son, Antilochus, was running, Hector and the Trojans showered him with a whining barrage of missiles. He didn't turn and stand until he reached his own lines. It was then that the Trojans, like lions who have tasted raw meat, charged the ships and completed this part of Zeus's design. He steadily turned up the Trojans' intensity and softened the Greeks' resolve to win. Hector would win all the glory for now. Priam's son would burn the beaked ships with fire from heaven and so fulfill the last syllable of Thetis' prayer. It was for this that Zeus waited. The glare from a burning ship. From then on, he would will the Trojans back from the ships and shift glory to the Greeks. With this intent, he roused Hector against the hollow ships, and Hector needed no urging. Hector raged like the war god, the spear wielder. Fire that consumes a wooded mountainside, foam flecking his mouth, eyes burning under fierce brows, and the helmet encasing his face a sinister glitter as Hector fought, as Zeus himself shed a cone of light from the aether around the solitary warrior, but only for this brief moment. Pallas Athena was hastening his doom under Achilles' hands. Yes, Hector was eager, but for all his efforts, probing the Greek lines where he saw the greatest concentration of fine weapons, he could not break their ranks. They were as solid as a wall, or an iron cliff that dropped sheer into the gray sea and withstands whistling winds and swollen waves that break against its rock face. The Greeks were not going to budge. So Hector, with a nimbus of fire about him, leapt high and fell upon their bulk. Waves driven by winds sometimes reach tsunami proportions. When one breaks over a ship, an entire vessel is hidden by foam, and the wind roars like devils in the sail. The crew shudders and their hearts turn to ice. So narrow is their passage out of death. So too the Greeks under Hector's charge. A maleficent lion charges a herd of cows grazing in the bottom land of a great marsh. There is no counting how many, and with them is only a single herdsman, inexperienced at contesting a heifer's carcass with a wild beast. The herdsman walks at the front or rear, but the lion attacks in the middle and is soon feeding on its kill. The others stampede off. It was marvelous to see the Greeks scattering before Hector and Father Zeus. Even though Hector killed only one man, Periphetes of Mycenae, the son of that Copreus, who used to shuttle messages from Eurystheus to Hercules. His son was better in every way, whether it came to running or fighting, and he had one of the best minds in Mycenae. Now he yielded the glory to Hector. As he turned, he tripped on the rim of his own shield, a Mycenaean style that went down to his feet and protected him from spears, but not from himself, as he stumbled and fell backward, his helmet ringing like a gong in his astonished ears. Hector was quick to take advantage, putting a spear into his chest before his watching comrades were able to react. They grieved for their friend, but were too afraid of shining Hector to help him. The Greeks regrouped within the ship's perimeter, but the Trojans kept coming. The outermost ships were conceded, but the Greeks did take a stand by their huts. They were massed now, too afraid to spread out through the camp, and they kept calling back and forth to each other. Nestor of Gerenia, the old general, implored them all in the name of their parents. "Fight like the men that you are, my friends, and feel some shame before the men around you. Remember your children, your wives, your possessions, and your parents, whether they are dead or alive. For the sake of those who are not here, I beseech you to stand firm and fight, and not retreat." This helped, but Athena helped them more, pushing aside the wondrous clouds of mist from their eyes. Light flooded in from both sides, from the ships behind and the battlefield in front. They could all see Hector now, and his men. The entire Greek army, from the idol in the rear to the champions in front, could see the enemy. Ajax decided it was time to make his move. Separating himself from the rest of the Greeks, he boarded a ship and strode along its deck, wielding a long pike made for naval warfare, some 40 feet in length, jointed with iron rings. And then, as skillfully as a stunt rider jumps from horse to horse as his chariot, drawn by a team of hand-picked thoroughbreds, speeds from plain to city down a highway lined with spectators who cheer him on, Ajax leapt from ship to ship, and his voice, like a shock wave from the wide blue sky, admonished the Greeks to defend their ships and the huts clutched beneath them. Hector reacted quickly, a streak of bronze armor flashing out from the general sea of bronze. Like a golden eagle, dive-bombing down to a riverbank where a flock of wild geese or cranes or long-necked swans are feeding. Hector made like that for a dark, proud ship, and a great hand reached down from Ida and pushed him on, and his army with him. The fighting began again, beside the ships, so keenly you would have thought the troops on both sides were fresh and had just entered battle. Their minds were different, though. The Greeks fought as if they would never get out of this battle alive, while every Trojan heart beat with the hope of burning the ships and killing Greek heroes. Such were their thoughts as they faced off in battle. Hector laid hold of the stern of a ship, a beautiful vessel that had brought Patroclus over to Troy, but would not bring him back home. It was about this ship that the Greeks and Trojans fought in close combat. Instead of withstanding assaults from arrows and javelins in flight, they fought toe-to-toe here of one heart in battle, hacking at each other with axes and hatchets, enormous swords, and double-edged spears. Many fine blades with black leather furrows fell to the ground, some from their hands, others from the shoulders of men as they fought. The earth flowed back with their blood, flowed black with their blood. Hector, once he had grasped the horns of the ship's stern, would not let go, and he called to the Trojans, "Fire! Bring fire and raise the war cry all together! Zeus has given us this day as payment for everything, to seize the ships that came here against the gods' will and have brought us endless trouble because of the cowardice of our elders, who, when I wanted to bring the fight here, kept me back and withheld the army. But if Zeus clouded our minds then, there is no doubt he is urging us on now." At this, the Trojans intensified their attack. Ajax, battered by everything they could throw, and sensing death if he stayed where he was, inched back along the 7-foot crossplank he had been standing on and jumped from the deck. He took up a position, guarding the ship, his spear point menacing any Trojan who tried to bring up fire, and his voice kept booming out alarms to his compatriots. "Soldiers of Greece, be men, my friends! We have to dig in a defense now. Do you think we have allies to back us up, or some stronger wall that will protect us? There's no fortified city behind us now, with reinforcements there to turn the tide. We're out here on the plain of Troy, with the sea at our backs, far from home, surrounded by armed men. If there's a way out, it's in our own hands, not in slacking off." And as Ajax spoke, his spear carved holes in the various Trojans, who thought that they might please Hector by bringing fire to the ship. He mangled a good dozen at close range like this. And that was book 15 of Homer's Iliad. So, what happened? We had the whole thing with Hera. Now, I think there's something important here about the interaction between the gods as far as understanding the way the world works. Zeus is the most powerful, and we know that because he mentioned, well, everybody says so except Poseidon, and even Poseidon was like, "Yeah, but I'll leave." So Zeus is the most powerful, but Hera talked about how all of them try to get through to Zeus, and he just doesn't care. And she eventually conceded and just said, like, "Listen, you just have to take what he gives you." Zeus, I think, is sort of a personification of just the whole world in a weird way, where you've got all the gods who are gods of different things, and Zeus is the father of all of them. And in a weird way, Hera saying you just gotta take what he gives you is, in a weird way, her just being like, life is tough. You know, it's just, this is how it's gonna be. You can't do anything about these things. And think about the things that Zeus does. They are things that are outside of the mortal's control. Like, he hurls lightning. You can't even hold on to lightning if you're mortal. He uses that as a weapon. You know, he's up in the clouds. Like, this is up before flight was a thing for humans, you know, and so it's like he's up above where you can't get him. You can't do anything about it. And maybe he's a huge personification of unwanted pregnancies. I don't know. But that's an important way of looking at it. Now, Zeus talks about also, he mentions he would throw people from their balcony if they tried to save Hera. And that's actually a reference you might remember to, I think it was book 1, where Hephaestus talks about how Zeus hurled him. So we, from the balcony down to earth, and he fell all day, And that kind of makes it's interesting to see that same story from another character's perspective, which is very, very cool stuff. Now, I had mentioned before about how Zeus had hanged Hera from the clouds with gold chains and anvils on her feet. And Zeus talks about that as well. Now, part of the reason why that happened was because a bunch of the gods, including Poseidon and Apollo, tried to do a coup to, defeat Zeus, because they all hated him. They all tied him up, and they were arguing about who was going to be in charge. And Hera, of course, assumed it was going to be her because she was sort of second in command, but everybody else wanted to be in charge. And while that was going on, that's when Thetis, Achilles' mother, went and got the 100-armed monsters, there were 3 of them, to rescue Zeus, basically. And, there's more to that story, but that's why Zeus owes Thetis a big favor, is because she saved him. And after that, now, one of the things that happened was Hera was not the only one punished for that. Poseidon and Apollo were punished in a rather interesting way, which is that they had to give up the trident and the bow for while they were being punished, and they were the ones who apparently built the walls of Troy, which is where we are now. So it's interesting just to see who's taking sides when it comes to Poseidon or Apollo, or when they switch sides, or when they're doing different things. It's because they do have kind of a history with that city, and of course Apollo has, I think, a special shrine there. I think we've mentioned that before. And so yeah, it's just an interesting way of looking at the world when Zeus is kind of all the other deities who represent singular things are which one of us is going to be in charge? Which is the most important? Is wisdom and war more important and handicraft than, say, marriage? Is marriage the foundation of your society, or is music the foundation of your society, or discord, all that stuff. And so that's how I think Zeus, as the Lord of the Sky, who's literally above everything else, partially that's just thematically how he gets his place, is he is just the overarching sort of almost common denominator in a weird way of all of them, which, and these other things can't do anything about him. They try. It's and we try to contest against the world with the things that the different gods represent. If you have suffering in your life, or stress or obligations, responsibility, you might try to combat that with just playing music, or having some security in a marriage, or you might go to join the army. It's interesting how these gods and goddesses they kind of make sense as personifications, archetypes, or representations of the real world and how people react. And it's interesting to see gods that are made in our image, as opposed to supposedly the other way around. But depending on the different religions. So that's kind of an interesting idea. There's almost some what's his name? What's the name of that German philosopher whose name I am forgetting? I don't know. I'll remember it later. But who talks about the subconscious and archetypes. I'll remember it later. Sorry, guys. But anyway, that's the thing with doing things live and when you're rambling. But so there's that. There's also, I had a note in here. Okay, so we've talked about fate in this book before, and the role that plays, and the role that Zeus plays in fate, where Zeus's job is to make sure that fate is fulfilled. You can mess with fate, but there are consequences to that. Now, we get 2 things that happen. in this in particular. Patroclus sees the fighting, and he's going to go talk to Achilles to try and convince him to fight. Zeus straight up says, like, hey, Patroclus is going to go to Achilles, and Achilles is going to have him fight for him. And just, lays out a pretty decent amount of, fate for us. Now, if this happens, if the things that Zeus says happens with Patroclus and Hector and all that, then that's kind of some terrible foreshadowing, isn't it? If those things don't happen, then it's, they're messing with fate, and they're still in the rules of the universe. If those things happen, then what? This is almost a question, not really so much about this book, but it's kind of like when you have a movie where there's a prophecy. Like, what's the point of that? It's like, this isn't foreshadowing. This is people saying, like, hey, this is going to happen later. So, and it's been mentioned a little bit before, and Zeus comes out and says what's going to happen next, perhaps not. Maybe you'll find out as we read this, if you haven't, if you don't remember this story too well. But Zeus says even his own son, Sarpedon, is going to die, who he cares about very much. Ares' son has died. Now, here's another thing. A lot of the gods have been playing with human beings like they're toys, but now we've seen this slow progression through this story where Aphrodite gets hurt. It starts affecting the gods. The gods start hitting each other, like Ares gets hit by Athena and Diomedes and all that. And now the gods are losing mortals that are precious to them. This mortal war is now starting to reach up to heaven. It's like heaven's reaching down, poking these people, and now it's starting to poke back. And that is how we have a divine escalation of the warfare that we really see in this, especially when Ares is about to just lose it. He loses his mind. He's going to go down. He's like, I don't care if Zeus blasts me. And Athena disarms him as just like, get back here. And she just says, get over your dead son, which is really harsh, Athena. Wow, not the goddess of sensitivity there, I guess. But he complies. I guess he'd have to. If Athena can disarm you, and she says, get back here, you better do as she says. That's what I think. And then we have Ajax jumping up, bouncing from ship to ship with a giant spear, pegging guys as he jumps from ship to ship. That's crazy. And of course we have this tide. It's going back and forth. It's like this battle's on the edge of a knife. It keeps going, but it's just barely being tilted over toward the Greeks. And I want you to imagine all this stuff that's happening. They are like on boats, be like, get away, just get off, stabbity stab, throw pots and pans at them. And over there is Achilles hanging out. He can hear this. Achilles can hear it, and he's just like, I'm not gonna. And I get it, Achilles, it's like, I'm not even saying Achilles is wrong about this, although he did say he was going to leave the next day, and he didn't. So, Achilles seems to be facing some indecision here. Maybe he's like, I'm going to leave after I get honored by everybody else properly. Maybe it's just kind of like, sometimes it's hard to quit a job. You get stuck. All of his buddies are there. His friends of the past 9 years. Ajax, everyone's there. The people that he plays games with. The people he talks to. The people he's fought with. I don't think he maybe he doesn't want to fight. Maybe he doesn't want to die, but he doesn't want to leave the war. But as we know from what he said, his mother said about him, Achilles can't have his cake and eat it too. He's either going to die at Troy and be remembered forever, or he's going to leave and be forgotten by everybody, but his family. And I think for young men especially, that could be a difficult decision. But anyhow. All right, so that's about it for my analysis there. And I'm going to go into the chat now. Oh, goodness, it looks like we have a bunch of little chats here. Here we go. Excellent stuff. All right, well, we're going to move into our chat portion of this evening's show. So, Bubba the musician says, I'm here. Thank you, Bubba. Joe says, hey, Joe, says, hello, all. Hey, where did Jim Morrison go? LOL. Let's see. Joe says, overlay. Are you saying Aegis? What is that exactly? Good question, Joe. The Aegis is an artifact that no one today quite understands. It is sort of described as sometimes like a tasseled fleece. Golden, electric, very powerful, but it's an artifact made by Hephaestus for Zeus, and Zeus sometimes lets people use it. So I imagine what it is, it's a very powerful magical object, and Apollo shakes it at people and goes, ah, and they run away. That's one use for it. Athena sometimes wears it around her neck. Sometimes you'll see statues with her where she's like wearing some kind of weird like cowl shoulder thing, and from what I understand, that's supposed to be the Aegis, but we don't quite totally know what it is. I imagine for a long time got it confused with the Golden Fleece from Jason and the Argonauts, and it might be a kind of fleece thing, but we know it's made by Hephaestus, and that's extremely powerful, and yeah, that's about it as far as I know anyway. Let's see. Yeah, Hector and Ajax, the rematch. Yeah, definitely, which is great. Those two guys keep hitting each other's foreheads, I'll tell you what. So Goram Darth Cal says, this kind of feels like the Hunger Games. Yeah, your battle prowess matters, but having a good sponsor god on your side makes a big difference. Yeah, it does. It's kind of weirdly unfair. How you'll have Iphidamus, who doesn't have a god supporting him. He goes to attack Agamemnon, and the tip of his spear bends. Or Zeus makes a guy's bowstring break and knocks it out of his hands. It's like, what? This cheating, but that's different people throughout time, have thought they were more or less blessed by the gods than different people. And I think that you can make a strong argument for favoritism sometimes. Let's see. Joe says, I think it would be hard to give glory to a particular soldier if I knew that one of the gods helped him. It's like the kid in grade school whose parents made his science project for him. Good point, Joe. That's an interesting way of thinking about it. I've often wondered about this kind of thing, where I've thought before that if you take a man like Audie Murphy, who I've mentioned before on this show, who was an American soldier during the Second World War, who was the most decorated American soldier ever, at least for a long time. He might still be. I think there was a man who recently posthumously was given a few more medals, so that earned, those. And so Audie Murphy might not be the most decorated one anymore, but if you read his book To Hell and Back, which is an autobiography, there's so many things he does and things that happen to him and things that don't happen to him, where he said in his life, he just said, I'm immune to the law of averages. There are so many times that just weird things happen for him in war, in battle. Whether it was like, a mortar lands right on his, like right next to his foot, right by his toe, and it blows the front of his shoe off, but he's okay. But because of the way the shrapnel went, it killed guys who were like 5 feet away from him. But I don't know. I think, let's be honest, everybody gets help from somebody at some point. And, but yeah, if I found out that, I mean, you gotta give credit to Ajax though. He's like fighting against the gods right now and doing a pretty good job. So, Goram Darth Cal says, did they have stunt riders back then? Yes. Yes, stunts have been around for a very long time. There's, I think in my Cine, it is, actually, hang on, I think I've got this book right here. All right, so yeah, stunt work, tumbling, all that kind of stuff has been around like forever. And to give you a, let's see, no nudity. All right, cool. There's to give you an idea of something. Is this my Cine? The Minoans. Okay, so the Minoans would do this thing called like I call it bowl tumbling. I'm not sure what it was actually called. And you can kind of see here. Let me see if this is. Oh wait, hang on just a second. Let me move over to this. All right, so you can kind of see here these two people who look like they're getting attacked by a bull. But what they're actually doing, if you see this bit of art up here, is they're tumbling over the bull. All right, so I really wish they would bring this back to rodeos, honestly, where a bull charges you and you just flip over it. And one of the things they would do is they'd get in a line, so there'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys or whatever, and the bull would charge, and they each would flip over after another, so you'd get this like wave of people. But yeah, people have been messing around with horses forever. That sounded funny. And people have been, doing stunt riding, jumping from chariots to the other. There's been jugglers and entertainers and things like that forever. It's something that doesn't. I think it's something that has happened forever that a lot of people don't realize, actually, which is entertainment, the musicians. Like, there were musicians at the, people call it the Colosseum, but it was called the Flavian Amphitheater, where the Romans held their big games and stuff. They had music going on there. There were guys going through the stands being like, hey, we got dormouse. Anyone want dormouse? And stuff. And like, hey, how much for those dormice? It's like, it's like 5 sesterces. It's like, you gotta be me, So that kind of thing's always gone on. But yeah. But stunt riding, like jumping between chariots and stuff, I mean, all you gotta think about is like, hey, if a bunch of guys had chariots and got drunk and there were some girls over there, do you really think that they wouldn't try to do stupid stuff? And then at some point, one of them would be really good at it and realize he could make money? There you go. Okay, so Joe says, I liked all the scenes with the gods. Yeah, Joe, I think this book to me is really well paced. The structure of it is very strange, because of what it's really about. But what I think is the real message of Iliad, which we'll get to by the end, I think. But yeah, it's like we have these action scenes that are intense, but then we have these really weirdly human scenes between the gods, and sometimes they're funny. Sometimes they're scary, like Zeus threatening to beat the tar out of Hera, and then Hephaestus being like, Mom, I'm really scared for you. It's like, yikes. I've talked to people who have had that experience, where, a friend of mine would tell me about how, let's get dark. A friend of mine would tell me about how, like, their father would beat their mom. Or how, like, this one woman I know told me about how her 2 brothers, when they got old enough, would fight their dad to protect their mom and stuff. It's like, well, that kind of thing happens in Greek mythology. And for all the, different cultures and oppression and all that stuff that happened in different parts of Greece and all that stuff, I have not found historical evidence to suggest that, it is not a, just a genetic part of being a guy to not want to protect your mom. That's the way it is. It's like, that's not, I don't think that's a very westernized mindset thing. I think that even in societies where, even in cultures or historical timelines where they're like as horrible to women as they've ever been, it's like, there's still that relationship. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I really do think that, and you can, I don't think I'm far off, especially reading this translation and seeing how Hephaestus and all the other gods react. that it's not like Zeus is treated like everything he's doing is good and right. I don't think that these scenes where he's like, I'm gonna beat the tar out of you, Heroes, when the people in the audience would go like, send her back to the kitchen. Like, I really don't think that's what this story is at all. Um, and I think that everything else we've read has supported that idea. But anyway, bringing it back to the chat. Let's see. I like Poseidon's reply, even though he finally gave in. Yeah. Carl Jung, thank you, Joe. Yes, Jung. Geez, thank you. Carl Jung was that philosopher I was talking about before, who talks about archetypes and the subconscious, who I forgot the name of. So, thank you, Joe. Bringing some class to this show. Let's see. I liked Poseidon's reply, even though he finally gave in. Yeah, Poseidon knew what he had to do, but I think he did a good job of, keeping his, what you call it, honor, respect, going. Anyway, all right, so we've got a couple by Gorham Darth Cal here. Gorham Darth Cal says, I get Achilles. Leaving is awkward. Do you have to go around saying goodbye? Can you just leave without saying anything? It's tough. Gorham Darth Cal says, I've seen that art before. I always wonder what the hell was going on, lol. Oh, about the bull jumping stuff. Yeah, so that was if you look up Minoan bull jumpers, tumblers, or whatever, you'll find it that way, and you can, but yeah, it was entertainment, it was cool. I think it also had, like, a religious aspect to it, but I'm not sure, like, if that was just like, hey, we're gonna open up the service with some exciting bull jumping, and all that. I'm not hugely expertised in that. It's a word I just made up. All right, so last comment that we got right now is from Gorham Darth Cal. Once again, says, it's interesting how at this time and for a while after personal glory was a big part of war, in modern times that seems to have turned around to the point where individuals don't want recognition. That's a really good point, Gorham. I think there's a few reasons for that. One reason is because in our culture now, war is seen as an entirely bad thing. Not to say that's not, but we still do medals and decoration. Like we have the Medal of Honor, or we have the Victoria Cross, or we don't, they do, but it's I think I was talking with a bunch of people lately sort of about this concept, which is that soldiers, I feel today, aren't really allowed to enjoy what they've done. And part of that's because it's disturbing to civilians if they do. A lot of the time it's just killing people, but as we see in this book, there are people who enjoy killing. It's like not all these characters are psychopaths. I kind of think I forget who it was, but there's a quote where it basically said, God loves war, otherwise why would there be so much of it? And I don't know that I agree with that, but there is something to be... I think someone has to like it. Someone's got to like it. We do it all the time. I think the modern battlefield changed a lot of things, too. Where the advent of guns and tanks and explosions and artillery, especially, which can ruin your life even if you don't get hit by it. I think there's a lot to be thought about there. But, there's... I don't want to get too far ahead of this book, because I think you might be surprised with how this book progresses when it comes to that kind of thing. And, I would say that that's an interesting part. I wonder if in America, one reason for soldiers... plenty of people will join the military for similar reasons, like for glory or adventure or something like that, because they hey, everybody looks up to soldiers, I want to be like that. Like, I get that. That's kind of the same thing. um, generals have been kind of like these guys before. Part of it might be because they read Iliad, but during the Second World War, you had people like Montgomery and General Patton who were at odds with each other a lot because they wanted to take certain cities first. They wanted that glory. They wanted their name in there. So for the guys who are the kings of war, I think that is still kind of around. Even if they don't go around boasting about it all the time, perhaps they know that that there is something there for them. I think there is. I don't think that is totally dead. You don't hear about it as much, but I think we get a little bit of that satisfaction now away from war, and we put it in superheroes, where it's good that you got the bad guy, and now when it comes to war, we're supposed to look at war as like, war is hell. I have grown used to the screams of grown men more than those of babies, or something like that. And I'm not a soldier, I'm not a veteran, and my opinions about those things typically err on the side of not having one. Um, having when it comes to whether a soldier enjoys killing or not, I think that's really none of my business, and I don't think that soldiers have to bemoan the loss of human life that they inflict on their enemies. So, um, now whether talking about like civilians or soldiers, all that stuff is a whole different topic. But yeah, I think you have a good point there, Goram Darth Cal. And but I think this book has more in it for you in particular than and me, but because of what you said. So with that, I think we are done for tonight, Thursday. Please, I would love it if you join me again for this Monday for episode 16, Sweet 16's episode. And don't read ahead now. And I hope you enjoyed wherever you had to drink. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'm just really amazed that people watch this show. I'm loving the living daylights out of it. I'm having a blast. I think you can tell. And it's just so cool that I get to share my favorite book with a bunch of people, and that some of you just keep coming on back, and and you interact with the chat. I love that. And so thank you so much for that. Thanks for being here with me. Have a wonderful night. Have yourself a good drink of whatever you're able to have, and I'll see you Monday. Cheerio.